I didn't notice the cake until the frosting brushed my sleeve. That's how close Greg waved it, balanced on a silver board like a trophy he planned to crown himself with. Our kitchen smelled like supermarket vanilla and artificial hope. He smiled the way people do when they've practiced in a mirror. "Manager," he said. "At last." Then he slid an envelope across the counter. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I'd graded essays with more warmth than that motion. Inside, divorce papers, folded with the care of a tax form. I didn't ask why. I already knew. I signed where he'd highlighted, neat as a checkmark. The silence between us grew thick and perfect. He mistook it for defeat. I filed it under plans. Greg always loved paperwork. Numbers behaved for him, people less so. 20 years of marriage had been an education in spreadsheets and condescension. Once upon a time, I thought his habit of narrating interest rates at dinner was charming. Now it felt like living with a talking calculator that had opinions about ambition. He poured himself a glass of something amber, lifted it toward me like a toast. "Don't look so hurt," he said. "You'll land on your feet. You're practical." I nodded because that was the cheapest way to exit a scene. He wanted noise, drama, something to feel superior about. Instead, I wiped a streak of frosting off my sleeve, said, "Congratulations," and walked out. The night outside hummed with sprinklers and crickets. I stood in our manicured front yard, the one I trimmed while he networked, and watched the neat rows of porch lights. Every house looked calm. I imagined each one holding its own quiet collapse behind those shutters. Suburbia was good at camouflage. I slept on the guest bed that night, surrounded by my own furniture and none of my history. The next morning, Greg left early, whistling. He'd probably practice his new manager voice in the car. By 8, a text buzzed through from Diane, his aunt. I heard the news. Greg finally got what he deserved. No mention of me. Diane liked her sentences to have clear heroes. By lunch, the group chat had decided I was taking time for myself. That was HOA code for something scandalous happened, and we're waiting for confirmation. I taught my afternoon English class anyway, reading The Crucible aloud to teenagers who thought hypocrisy was a costume from history. When the final bell rang, I stayed behind to tidy papers. On the whiteboard, I'd written, "Character is revealed under pressure." It was meant for students, but the universe underlined it just for me. That night, Greg didn't come home. The next day, he called to discuss logistics. "I'll keep the house," he said. "You'll get the settlement. It's generous." Generous, like a tip. I told him fine. He hesitated, maybe surprised that I wasn't crying or begging. He'd spent months preparing for my outrage. I gave him silence instead. Silence unnerved him more than shouting ever could. Weeks blurred into errands. Lawyers, signatures, moving boxes. Every acquaintance treated me like a fragile figurine. "You'll meet someone," they said, which was the kind of comfort that assumed you hadn't already met yourself. I didn't need rescuing. I needed a new direction. One Friday, after packing up my classroom, I ran into Sam Patel in the grocery aisle. He'd been one of my best students years ago, quiet, analytical, always running numbers in the margins of literature essays. He told me he was consulting for a startup that helps schools manage finances. "Teachers never get credit for knowing systems," he said. "You should see how bad these budgets are." I laughed for the first time in months. We ended up at the cafe near the old strip mall, scribbling on napkins. By the time the streetlights blinked on, we'd mapped an idea, a small consulting firm teaching financial literacy to educators and small businesses. Real, practical help. I invested a piece of the settlement money. Greg's generous gift would become the seed of something entirely mine. 6 months later, we had a name, Brightline Advisory, and a handful of clients who paid on time. Sam handled the analytics. I handled the teaching. Turns out, explaining compound interest was not so different from explaining Shakespeare. Both required decoding greed. I moved into a modest townhouse a few blocks away from the old neighborhood. Same manicured lawns, fewer memories. Every morning I'd walk past our former house, Greg's house now, and note the additions, the luxury grill, the imported patio set, the second car that wasn't mine. I didn't look in the windows. I didn't need to. Rumors drifted, of course. Kendra, my once friend and now suburban correspondent, called under the pretense of returning a casserole dish. "I just want you to hear it from me," she said. "He's been seeing someone from the bank. Nothing serious." I almost laughed. "Kendra," I said, "everything Greg does is serious, especially himself." She hesitated. "Well, she's very polished. Community relations. You know the type." "Oh, I know the type," I said. "Polish wipes off." Later that week, a parent volunteer from school forwarded me a screenshot from a social feed. Greg, suit sharp, arm casually draped near a blonde in a red dress. Caption: "Power couple celebrating new milestones." Comments full of congratulations. My name wasn't mentioned once, which was its own kind of relief. I learned early that anger is energy. If you aim it well, it builds engines. By spring, Brightline had doubled in clients. I still taught part-time, habit more than necessity, but my evenings were now filled with contracts, webinars, and a slow satisfaction that didn't need witnesses. Then came the HOA meeting. Our community hall smelled of folding chairs and ambition. Diane sat at the head of the table like a senator. "Item 7, she announced, "Laura Benton's fence color." "Yes?" I said. "It's not on the approved palette." "It's beige," I said, "like every other fence on this street." "It's not the beige," she said, tapping a printed sample. "Yours leans warm. We prefer cool undertones." Half the room murmured. The rest texted. I smiled, because that's what you do when your audience is an HOA. "Noted," I said. "I'll repaint it the moment the bylaws specify the Kelvin temperature of acceptable beige." That earned a few laughs, and one glare from Diane. The meeting rolled on until someone triggered the sprinklers outside. A jet of water hissed through the open side door, splashing across Diane's pristine binder. She yelped. The crowd scattered. I didn't move. The sprinklers shut off as suddenly as they'd started, leaving wet shoe prints like punctuation marks across the tile. Later, someone said I'd done it. I hadn't, but the rumor pleased me anyway. Every rebellion needs folklore. Afterward, in the parking lot, Kendra caught up with me. "Diane's furious," she whispered, delighted. "She said you've changed." "I have," I said. "Beige looks different now." The next morning, an anonymous message landed in my inbox. A photo of Greg and that same blonde, Marissa, laughing at a bar. Captioned, "He's doing so well." No name attached, but I knew Kendra's phrasing anywhere. I stared at it for a minute, then filed it into a folder labeled Motivation. It was becoming a thick folder. Time passed, marked by invoices and seasons. Greg's face appeared occasionally in the local paper, quoted about responsible lending and community trust. Each time, I imagined the mirror he must talk to before interviews, reminding himself how sincerity looks. By year 2, Brightline was stable enough to lease an office. We painted the walls soft grey, lined the shelves with plants. Sam called it organic credibility. I called it mine. One Tuesday, while reviewing client data, Sam said, "Have you heard about the bank merger?" "What merger?" "Greg's branch and another regional. Big deal. There's a press release coming this week." My coffee paused halfway to my lips. "That's fast." He shrugged. "Consolidation season. Happens everywhere." That night, I scrolled through business news until I found the headline, "Regional merger to expand community banking footprint." Greg's name appeared halfway down the article. Public relations, quote, all buzzwords. The second to last paragraph mentioned a potential consulting partner for transition training. Brightline Advisory, among others, was listed for consideration. I laughed so loudly my neighbor's dog barked. It felt like the universe had delivered a setup wrapped in corporate jargon. The next day, an official email pinged in. Exploratory outreach, training support opportunities. The sender was Evan Ross, liaison for the merger committee. The CC line included Greg Benton. The subject line was dry as toast, but my name sat beside Greg's bank like a fuse beside a match. I read it twice, then once more for flavor. The message asked if Brightline would be interested in providing educational modules for staff transitions. Neutral tone, professional. I drafted a calm acknowledgement, nothing personal, nothing revealing. Business only. Then I stared at the CC field again. Greg Benton, bank manager. He had no idea. That ignorance was its own form of interest accruing quietly. That evening, I walked through my neighborhood as dusk softened the lawns. The air smelled of grilled chicken and ambition. Sprinklers clicked on in rhythmic succession. Windows glowed with families watching sitcoms or pretending to. From one house I heard laughter. Too loud, too rehearsed. I thought of Greg's new circle, the co-workers who'd clinked glasses over my replacement. Somewhere in those polished lives, they believed they'd won. I let that thought sit, calm as math. A car eased up beside me, Troy Ellery's, Marissa's on-again, off-again partner. He rolled down the window. Laura, right, Greg's ex. That's me, I said. Just saying hi, he said, grinning the way men do when they think charm is currency. Small world, you still around here? Sometimes, I said. I like the scenery. He winked, drove off too fast, tires squealing just enough to sound important. His license plate read, Try-Win. Subtlety clearly skipped that household. I made a mental note. Vanity plates, say more than confessions. Back home, I opened the email again, reread my own reply draft. Professional, distant, perfect. I hit send, then closed my laptop. The night hummed like anticipation. In the reflection of the window, I saw myself. Same face, same calm, but something different behind the eyes. Not rage, not despair, focus. Like the start of a long equation whose solution you can already glimpse. I brewed tea, took out a notebook, and began listing. Connections, assets, upcoming contracts, public filings. Not revenge, not yet. Just data. Information, after all, was how Greg had always won. Now it was how he'd lose. Outside, a sprinkler sputtered to life again, misting across the street light. Water caught the light in a brief shimmer, clean, ordinary, unstoppable. I smiled. Beige, I thought, could be powerful in the right shade. The morning after Evan's email, I woke to sunlight sliding across my planner, like a spotlight on a stage I hadn't asked for. My phone buzzed with a reminder about a client session, teachers from a nearby charter school needing financial literacy training. I brushed my hair, put on a soft blue blazer that suggested optimism without shouting it, and pretended my stomach wasn't a knot of strategy. During the workshop, I spoke about numbers the way some people talk about faith. Money doesn't vanish, I told them. It changes forms, like energy or grudges. The room laughed, half nervously. Teachers always do when they sense truth hiding in a joke. When it ended, Sam was waiting in the hallway, laptop under his arm. You're trending, he said. Please tell me that means our webinar replay. Partly, but mostly because Greg's bank posted the merger news this morning. Local outlet picked it up. He's quoted twice. Of course he is. Sam frowned. He CC'd you by mistake on that first outreach, right? He knows it now. I imagine the moment will arrive soon, I said. Let him enjoy his confidence until then. It's expensive. That afternoon, I went for a walk to clear my head. The neighborhood looked the same. Clipped lawns, pastel shutters. the faint hum of gossip under every trimmed hedge. Two women stood by a mailbox, lowering their voices as I passed. My name floated out in the breeze, soft as perfume. I smiled politely. It terrified them more than confrontation. At home, I poured coffee and checked the news again. Every quote from Greg sounded rehearsed. Community stability, local trust, shared vision. He'd finally achieved what he always wanted, a public image built entirely from synonyms for importance. My phone rang, unknown number. I let it buzz out. Seconds later, a voicemail alert appeared. I didn't need to play it to know whose voice it was. When I finally listened, Greg sounded carefully casual. "Hey, Laura, just thought we might, since you're in consulting now, talk about maybe a collaboration. Purely business. You probably saw the announcement." I replayed the first 5 seconds 3 times. Purely business. That phrase was practically a personality for him. I didn't call back. I drafted an internal memo instead, setting boundaries. All merger-related inquiries to be handled via official channels only. Sam signed it with his neat initials. Policy was a wonderful armor. That weekend brought the neighborhood's charity mixer, the kind of event where people wore generosity like perfume. Diane had arranged it, of course, claiming it was for community spirit. Translation, a stage for her favorite stories. She cornered me near the buffet, holding a glass of something sparkling. "Laura, dear, how are you managing?" "Surviving suburbia," I said. Her smile tightened. I ran into Greg. He seems positively glowing these days. "Good skincare regimen," I said. She blinked. "I suppose success looks good on him." "So does humility," I said. "But I guess it didn't fit." She wandered off soon after. Small victories count. The ballroom lights dimmed for a slideshow of sponsors. I scanned the list. Banks, real estate agencies, wellness boutiques. Near the bottom, Brightline Advisory appeared in small print. Sam had registered us weeks ago. The slide changed again, to photos from previous mixers. And there, in full resolution, was Greg and Marissa, smiling mid-toast, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The caption read, "Partners in Progress." It wasn't the first time I'd seen their picture, but it was the first time it glowed 10 feet tall above my head. My fingers tightened around my glass, but I didn't look away. Instead, I smiled as though watching a neighbor's child perform at a recital. When the lights came up, I applauded with everyone else. After the event, Sam caught me outside. "You okay?" "Perfect," I said. "Remind me to send the committee an updated photo for next year's slideshow. Something brighter." Something brighter became a mantra. At work, I focused on expansion. 2 new clients, a webinar deal, a speaking engagement at the local college. Each accomplishment felt like tightening a knot around the future Greg had taken for granted. Then came a new email. This one not mistaken. Evan Ross, polite as ever. "We're finalizing consultant selections next week. Can you confirm interest?" I typed, "Brightline remains interested under standard professional terms. Please direct all communication through the official project portal." Then, before sending, I added, "Note, for transparency, I previously worked in education within your market area and am familiar with several branch managers, including Mr. Benton." Translation, I know the terrain. Proceed carefully. That night, the gossip cycle spun faster. My neighbor Janet knocked on my door, uninvited but bearing cookies, which meant she had information to deliver. "You didn't hear this from me," she began, a phrase that guarantees everyone already has. "But Greg's been talking at the gym. Says you're trying to ride his merger." "Interesting metaphor," I said. "I told him you're too classy for drama," she added quickly, eager to keep favor with both sides. I smiled. "I appreciate that. Next time, tell him I charge consulting fees for publicity." By Tuesday, I had the confirmation email from Evan. Brightline was officially part of the training panel. The irony was elegant. Greg's branch would sit through workshops designed by the woman he'd called useless weight. I printed the schedule and pinned it above my desk. The next week blurred into preparation. I built slide decks with quiet precision, adding case studies and hypothetical examples that mirrored Greg's management style a little too closely. Never overpromise, never underdeliver. One slide read, followed by, leadership without empathy erodes trust faster than any market downturn. Sam raised an eyebrow. Subtle. I'm done being subtle, I said. Subtlety is how people like Greg win. The Friday before the first workshop, I attended another HOA meeting. Beige fences again, lawn violations, Diane's crusade against inflatable yard decor, the usual suburban opera. During a pause, she leaned close. Marissa's car was keyed last night, she whispered, wide-eyed. People are saying it's you. Why would I waste my keys? I said. They open better things. Laughter rippled through the room. Diane flushed. Rumors make better fertilizer than truth. Later, walking to my car, I caught movement near the corner house. Troy, filming something on his phone, camera pointed toward me. I called out, You need a permit for that, or is this another influencer experiment? He smirked. Relax. Public sidewalk. Then you won't mind if I document you documenting me, I said, lifting my own phone. I opened the neighborhood watch app and began streaming live. Within seconds, notifications popped up. Is that Troy again? Someone tell him to stop messing with people. He cursed under his breath, got into his shiny car, and sped away. The comments filled with emoji applause. I walked home smiling, the quiet kind that stays behind your ribs and hums. Later that evening, Sam texted, You okay? Heard about that video thing? Better than okay, I replied. The neighborhood just elected me unofficial security lead. Saturday brought sunlight and another email from Evan, confirming Greg's attendance at next week's training session. Please ensure confidentiality and professionalism, it read, as if I needed reminding. I spent Sunday rehearsing. The workshop outline was flawless. The first exercise required participants to identify ethical gaps in a mock case study, suspiciously similar to Greg's management habits. Not personal, just instructive. On Monday morning, I arrived early at the hotel conference room. Coffee urns lined the back table. Branded pens waited like soldiers. Sam handled tech while I tested the projector. At 9 sharp, participants filed in. Managers, analysts, assistants, and Greg. He stopped short when he saw me at the podium. Laura, he said finally, didn't realize. Good morning, everyone, I interrupted, cheerful. Please sign in and take a seat. We're about to begin. He hesitated, then joined the back row. His tie was too bright, his expression tighter than I remembered. When I introduced myself, co-founder of Brightline Advisory, specializing in ethical leadership and fiscal transparency, his jaw flexed. Perfect. Throughout the session, I kept my tone even, my humor light. The best way to lose credibility, I said at one point, is to treat your team like a mirror instead of a group of minds. A few attendees laughed. Greg didn't. By lunch, the tension had fermented nicely. Sam handled closing remarks while I lingered near the exit. Greg approached, face composed. You could have warned me, he said. You could have thanked me, I replied. We're improving your branch's optics. That's what you wanted, isn't it? He opened his mouth, closed it, and walked away. I watched him go, feeling the rare satisfaction of balance restored, even briefly. That night, I poured a glass of wine and reread the day's feedback forms. All positive except one anonymous note. Trainer clearly has personal history with management participant. Could be conflict of interest. I smiled. Greg's handwriting had always leaned forward, impatient even in disguise. The following week, word spread faster than any press release. Brightline's workshops were refreshing, real, disarmingly honest. Our inbox flooded with inquiries. Meanwhile, Greg's branch audit was postponed. Something about inconsistent documentation. Not scandalous, just inconvenient enough to sting. Kendra texted, "You must be thrilled. The universe really works fast." I typed back, "The universe had help." She sent a string of laughing emojis, then, "You're dangerous, Laura." Maybe, but danger, properly managed, was just another form of control. One evening, while reviewing reports, I noticed a faint reflection in my office window. The framed certificate Greg once insisted I display in our old house. Outstanding educator, county schools. I'd kept it without realizing why. Now it looked almost prophetic, as if it had been waiting for me to remember I knew how to teach lessons after all. As I turned off the lights, the city skyline blinked in the distance, half awake and humming. The merger loomed larger each day, a storm of meetings and photo ops and polished press lines, and I stood right in its quiet center, calm, smiling, ready. When my phone buzzed again with a message from Evan, confirming another project milestone, CC, Greg Benton, I didn't even open it. I knew what silence sounded like on his end, and for once it wasn't mine. The week after the workshop passed in a slow simmer of polite chaos. Emails stacked up like dominoes, each one a new version of Greg's crumbling composure, dressed in business tone. He hadn't written me directly again. He was too proud, but I saw the trails, copied threads, urgent subject lines, phrases like unforeseen optics issue, the kind of sentences written by a man still pretending to control the narrative. By Thursday morning, our office felt different. Sam had caught the rhythm of success, humming under his breath while he typed. "You know," he said, "it's funny how these banks suddenly want transparency training. It's like the word spread." "Transparency is contagious when reputation starts sweating," I said. He grinned. "You've got a wicked way with finance." "English major," I said. "We learn how to weaponize clarity." At noon, Evan Ross showed up unannounced. He was exactly as his email suggested, polite to the point of invisibility. He stood in the doorway, clipboard tucked to his chest. "Apologies for the intrusion, Mrs. Benton. I was in the area and thought we could touch base about the merger rollout." "Of course," I said. "You'll forgive the lack of small talk, I'm allergic." He smiled faintly. "I'll keep it clinical." We discussed logistics for half an hour. Timelines, deliverables, stakeholder sessions. When he mentioned Greg's branch, his tone shifted slightly, as if trying not to sound curious. "Your ex-husband is managing a lot of pressure," he said carefully. "He's practiced," I replied. Pressure has always been his favorite accessory. Evan cleared his throat. "There's some chatter about presentation materials overlapping with internal bank content. Any chance your firm used reference documents from your previous marriage?" I met his gaze. "No chance. I wrote my materials from scratch. You can check the timestamps." He nodded quickly, scribbling a note. "Good. Just covering all sides." When he left, Sam whistled low. That sounded almost like an accusation. "It was," I said, "but an uninspired one. Greg's running out of strategies." That night, I scrolled through public records again, tracing the merger's paper trail like a detective following footprints. Every step was legal, neat, predictable, and perfectly positioned for collapse if the right questions appeared at the right time. I didn't need to invent lies. I just needed to let truth echo louder. Saturday arrived with grey skies and gossip. Kendra texted me at dawn. "Emergency coffee. HOA group chat is exploding." I met her at the bakery, where cinnamon rolls hid between stacks of rumor. Kendra leaned across the table. "So apparently, Marissa's title at the bank isn't what she says it is. She calls herself Community Engagement Director, but the actual paperwork says Assistant Marketing Liaison. Half the neighborhood thinks she inflated her resume." "Inflated," I said, sipping my coffee, "is her favorite verb." Kendra giggled. "Diane's already drafting a message about misrepresentation." "Of course she is. Scandal gives her calcium. Anyway, Kendra said, lowering her voice, people say Greg's furious. He blames some misunderstanding from a training session that made him look, his words, less than visionary. He thinks you did it on purpose. I smiled. Purpose requires intention. I just tell the truth in well-lit rooms. On my walk home, the sky cracked open with light drizzle. I passed Greg's house, his precious fortress of upgrades, and noticed a moving truck idling nearby. Marissa stood on the porch, shouting into her phone. Boxes leaned against the railing like evidence. I didn't slow down, but my pulse marked the rhythm of quiet satisfaction. By Monday, the office buzzed again. Evan sent another email. Minor delay in merger announcement. Internal review pending. Thank you for patience. Sam raised an eyebrow. Internal review means panic, right? Exactly, I said. And panic means opportunity. That afternoon, I drafted a polished, factual memo for the merger board. It summarized Brightline's training impact and included screenshots from my old teacher blog, publicly dated, showing the original educational frameworks Greg had once adapted for his bank presentations years ago. No accusations, just context. Title: Clarification on Source Attribution and Ethical Instructional Design. When I sent it, I CC'd Evan and the board's generic address. I didn't include Greg. I wanted him to find out the same way he'd found everything else lately. Too late. 2 days later, my phone rang again. Private number. I answered this time. Laura. Greg's voice carried that strained civility people use when pretending they aren't desperate. You had no right to involve the board. I sent a professional clarification, I said. The board asked for transparency. I provided it. You're trying to ruin me. I laughed softly. Greg, I couldn't ruin you. You did that when you believed I wouldn't notice. He was silent for a beat, then said, You think this makes you look strong? You'll come off bitter. Maybe, I said, but bitter keeps longer than naive. He hung up without another word. I stared at the phone, then placed it face down. The silence afterward felt cleaner than anything I'd heard in months. That evening, I attended another community event, because revenge, when practiced properly, requires witnesses. It was a fundraising dinner at the country club, all polite laughter and unspoken hierarchies. Diane hovered near the buffet, gossiping about career women who don't know when to stop. When she saw me, her smile tightened. Laura, she said, I must say, you've been quite visible lately. It's the lighting, I said, very forgiving. Marissa arrived 10 minutes later, face pale but poised. She avoided my table, but our eyes met once across the room. For a moment, something like understanding flickered there. Not sympathy exactly, but recognition. She knew she'd stepped into the space I'd vacated and realized it wasn't a prize. After dinner, Diane cornered me again. People are saying you embarrassed Greg at work. That's cruel, dear. Whatever happened, you were partners once. Partners share effort, I said, not credit theft and public mockery. Her lips pressed thin. You always had a sharp tongue. And you always mistake honesty for sharpness, I said. It's dull minds that bruise easiest. By the time I left, my cheeks ached from smiling. Outside, the parking lot shimmered under streetlights. A sleek black car idled near the curb. Troy's again. He lowered the window. Nice speech in there, he said. Didn't give one. Didn't need to, he said, grinning. You own the room just by existing. I sighed. Does that line usually work? Depends on the audience. Then consider this constructive feedback, I said. You're talking to the wrong demographic. He laughed, revved the engine, and sped off. I watched him vanish around the corner, leaving only the faint echo of his ego. At home, I found another anonymous envelope slipped under my door. Cream paper, neat handwriting. Inside was a single photo. Greg standing outside the bank, mid-argument with someone cropped out of frame. On the back, someone had written, He's unraveling. No signature. I stared at it for a long moment before sliding it into my folder labeled Motivation 2.0. Days turned into a rhythm. Client meetings, polite interviews, local news pieces quoting me as financial ethics expert. Every success was a mirror Greg had to face. He stopped appearing in press photos. His signature vanished from bank memos. The silence that once smothered me now wrapped around him. He was learning how it felt. One morning, Evan called. "The board wanted me to extend gratitude for your documentation," he said. "It clarified some questions." "Glad to be useful," I said. "There's talk of restructuring after the merger. Certain leadership positions might be reevaluated." "I'm sure they'll make wise choices," I said, careful not to sound amused. When I hung up, Sam peeked over his monitor. "Good news?" "Better than good," I said. "Predictable." That evening, while filing away reports, I opened my email to find Greg's name again. This time, the message was short. "Congratulations on your success. Truly, I hope you find peace." Peace, I thought, is just the quiet between strategies. I deleted the email, emptied the trash, and watched the cursor blink. A small, rhythmic reminder that endings are just pauses before the next move. By the time spring returned, the suburb had started to buzz again. Half gossip, half pollen. Even the wind carried rumors. You couldn't water your lawn without overhearing someone's new theory about the Bentons. Apparently, I'd either joined a secret investment cult or blackmailed the entire bank board into submission. The truth, of course, was far less cinematic and far more satisfying. I had patience, and patience is sharper than any scandal. That Monday began with a soft knock on my office door. Sam entered, holding a printed memo from the bank's PR team. "They're holding a press event this weekend," he said, "announcing new leadership roles after the merger. Greg's not on the list." I set down my coffee. "He'll pretend it's voluntary." "He's got a backup plan," Sam said. "Rumor says he's trying to court private investors for his own boutique branch." I smiled. Private investors prefer leaders who can spell credibility. Let's make sure his spell check fails. That afternoon, I attended a community planning session at the clubhouse, because in our neighborhood, influence often disguised itself as bake sale management. Diane presided, pearls gleaming, discussing parking permits like national policy. Halfway through, she made a point of praising those who know how to move on gracefully after personal setbacks. Every head turned toward me. I sipped my lemonade. When the meeting ended, I approached her. "Diane, I'd love to volunteer for the community event this Friday. Perhaps I could handle publicity." Her smile wavered. "That's usually Marissa's department." "Exactly," I said. "I'm hoping to lighten her load." She couldn't refuse without looking territorial. "Of course, dear," she said tightly. "I'll send the access details." Later that night, I scrolled through Marissa's social pages. Photos of brunches, filtered sunsets, motivational captions. Her public persona was a curated collage of self-assurance. Beneath it, I could see the tremor. Comments slowing, followers quietly unfollowing since the audit rumors began. Reputation fatigue, the invisible contagion of modern suburbia. At 2 a.m., an idea clicked with the precision of a lock turning. Nothing illegal, nothing harmful, just optics. Optics were the currency Greg and his circle understood best. By Wednesday, I'd arranged the permits. The HOA gate, usually plain, would host a small welcome spring decoration, technically under the umbrella of the event I now managed. Sam helped me program a sprinkler timer and a small confetti launcher left over from a charity drive. I told him it was a morale experiment. He didn't ask further. Sam had learned that curiosity could be hazardous to plausible deniability. Friday arrived bright and smug. At 3 p.m, Troy's car, a gleaming white convertible with custom rims, rolled up to the gate. He had his phone propped on the dashboard, live streaming as he announced, "New ride, new chapter." The HOA chat lit up. Residents stepped onto porches. Diane peeked through her blinds. The sprinklers triggered exactly on schedule. Jets of water arced through the air, glittering in sunlight, hitting the car's hood with relentless precision. A beat later, the confetti launcher went off, pink, silver, gold, blanketing the scene in sparkling chaos. The banner behind the gate, programmed to unfurl automatically, dropped with quiet triumph, borrowed shine fades. The live stream caught every second. The comments exploded. "Who planned this? Priceless. Is that poetic justice?" Troy's shocked expression might have been art. He jumped out, shouting something I couldn't hear. I stayed half a block away, sipping iced tea, looking like a bystander admiring suburban spontaneity. Within an hour, clips circulated through every local group chat. Marissa's handle trended briefly, unfavorably. Diane called an emergency meeting about unauthorized installations. I offered to help draft the apology email. The following morning, Marissa appeared at my office unannounced. She looked like someone who'd lost the password to her own composure. "You think this is funny?" she snapped. "I think it's community engagement," I said mildly. "You're the expert. You've been stalking us." "No," I said. "Just observing patterns. People pay me for that now." Her eyes flashed. "You're obsessed with Greg. You can't stand that he moved on." "Moved on?" I tilted my head. "He's running in circles. The scenery just changes." For a second she seemed to falter. Then she hissed, "You're cruel." "Efficient," I corrected. "Cruelty requires emotion. I outsourced that months ago." She left without another word, slamming the door hard enough to shake the blinds. Sam emerged from the conference room, eyebrows high. "Should I ask?" "No," I said, "but maybe order extra confetti for the next fiscal quarter." That weekend, I caught the first tremors of the next rumor. Greg had been using sections of my old educational blog in his corporate talks again, updating the titles but keeping the structure. A small mistake. Timestamp metadata travels like a ghost. Sam found the evidence easily. "You posted this lesson plan 5 years ago," he said. "He's just swapped the examples." I looked at the screen. My words, his initials at the bottom. He always did love shortcuts. We both knew what to do next. No threats, no confrontation, just precision. I compiled the original materials, public URLs included, and scheduled them in a LinkedIn post titled, "5-Year-Old Lesson Plans Still Teaching New Managers Integrity." Sam laughed so hard he had to mute himself during a client call. By Monday morning, the post had circulated across half the financial district. The comments section bloomed with polite astonishment. Some connected the dots, others pretended not to, but Greg's borrowed brilliance was suddenly a very public question mark. That afternoon, Evan called. "I assume you've seen the discussions online." "I don't control the internet," I said. "I barely control my recycling schedule." He sighed. "Look, between us, the board is reconsidering certain representations. They want a fresh image before next week's cutover." "I understand," I said. "Fresh images are healthier for morale." As soon as we hung up, I leaned back in my chair. The air felt electric, anticipation wrapped in quiet. For the first time since the divorce, I didn't feel like I was chasing equilibrium. I was writing it. That night, rain arrived in fine, steady sheets. The neighborhood shimmered under streetlights. From my porch, I could see Greg's house, lit but still. Maybe he was staring at his laptop, reading comments, calculating escape routes. Maybe Marissa was scrolling through the same feed, realizing digital reputation doesn't come with refunds. I turned off the porch light and watched the rain bead on the railings. Everything looked polished, temporary, and deserved. The next morning, Sam knocked on my door, holding a folder. "The bank's final schedule," he said. "Cut-over weekend starts Friday night. They'll be working through system migrations. Evan wants us on site to monitor training metrics. Perfect, I said. One last field trip. You're sure you're okay being there? Sam, I said, smiling, I built a business inside the ruins of my marriage. A data migration can't hurt me. He laughed softly. Fair point. When he left, I opened the folder and scanned the details. Floor maps, shift rosters, staff access passes. One name highlighted in red, Greg Benton, project liaison. Of course. The symmetry was almost artistic. I closed the folder, poured a cup of coffee, and whispered to the empty room, almost there. Outside, the neighborhood was waking up, sprinklers ticking, dogs barking, gossip engines revving. I stood at the window, watching the street fill with its usual pretend serenity. Somewhere behind those blinds, people were discussing me. I didn't mind. Stories need narrators, and I'd finally taken mine back. The sky was bright again, too bright for comfort. I adjusted the blinds until the light cut diagonally across my desk like a warning, and sat down to plan the final act. The office was quiet the morning the merger's final stage began, the kind of quiet that pretends to be calm but smells like adrenaline. Sam sat at his desk surrounded by empty coffee cups, running simulations on employee performance metrics. Outside, a soft wind rattled the blinds, carrying the faint hum of suburban sprinklers and the world pretending everything was normal. Big night, Sam said, eyes on his screen. They're flipping the system at midnight. Good, I said, closing my laptop. I like when things turn over in the dark, less pretense. He looked up. You're really going to the site? Yes, I said. Vendor pass approved, legitimate appointment. I'll stand in the corner, nod at the right moments, and enjoy the fireworks. Figurative fireworks, Sam said quickly. I smiled. Of course. The day crawled by with that peculiar rhythm of waiting. Emails thinned. The sun slid west, smearing the sky with corporate gold. I changed into dark trousers and a grey jacket, something neutral enough to blend with professionals who mistake silence for power. By 7, I was driving toward the bank's downtown tower. The parking garage was nearly full, employees hustling in and out, eyes bright with caffeine and anxiety. I found a spot near the stairwell, stepped out, and inhaled that sterile evening air that lives only in financial districts. Somewhere above, the skyline glimmered like it wanted to be forgiven for something. Inside, the lobby buzzed, screens flashing, integration success, interns running with clipboards. Evan met me near the elevators, his tie slightly crooked for the first time I'd ever seen. Glad you made it, he said. It's chaos upstairs. I thrive in chaos, I said. It's quieter than marriage. He didn't laugh, but his eyes softened. Your credentials are set. Just stay near the observation zone. I nodded. Don't worry, I only spectate. When the elevator doors opened, the noise hit like static. Technicians shouted acronyms, managers barked into phones, monitors pulsed with spreadsheets and migration logs. The whole floor felt like a beehive that had read too many leadership books. And there, near the center, was Greg. He wore his title like armor, sleeves rolled, lanyard flashing, trying to look irreplaceable. His voice carried, firm and slightly frantic. We need confirmation from finance before pushing the client accounts live. A young analyst nodded, scurrying off. Greg turned and froze when he saw me. Laura, he said too loud. Mr. Benton, I said pleasantly. Don't let me interrupt. What are you doing here? Monitoring, vendor pass, all very official. I held up my badge. You approved the contract, remember? His jaw tightened. This isn't appropriate. Neither was serving divorce papers with dessert, I said. But here we are. Before he could reply, Evan appeared. Everything all right? Greg forced a smile. Fine, just reminiscing. I stepped aside, watching the storm build. The screens flickered once, twice. Someone shouted for network verification. Evan darted toward the servers, muttering about timing. Greg followed, waving his phone like a scepter. I drifted behind, invisible in plain sight. The system hiccup was minor, some mislabeled file delaying synchronization, but Greg, true to form, overmanaged it. Within minutes, his orders contradicted each other. Staff looked lost. I could almost hear the tremor in his confidence. When the backup finished, Evan called for a quick debrief. The group gathered by the glass partition, 10 people, all weary smiles. Evan thanked the teams, praised adaptability, then said casually, "For public-facing updates, the board has chosen to highlight new leadership in the press release. Greg, you'll liaise on the transition internally." The words landed like a polite guillotine. Greg blinked, confused. "I'm not. What does that mean?" "It means optics," Evan said gently. "Fresh faces for the public campaign." Greg's shoulders sagged an inch. He forced a grin, murmured something about whatever's best for the company, but the color drained from his ambition. He turned to me, eyes sharp again. "Did you do this?" "Do what?" I asked. "Attend a meeting. Get a badge. Exist." He took a step closer, lowering his voice. "You've been pulling strings. I can feel it." "Relax," I said quietly. "No strings. Just mirrors. You're the one standing in front of them." A commotion near the entrance interrupted us, someone dropping a tray of coffee cups, the liquid spreading like punctuation across the tile. Staff rushed to clean it. I used the distraction to step back toward the corridor, content to watch the last act unfold. Greg followed, of course. His footsteps echoed on the polished floor. "You wanted to ruin me," he said. "Congratulations." I turned, keeping my voice even. "No, Greg, I wanted to balance the equation. You built the numerator. I just simplified it." He looked around, noticing the security cameras, the open sight lines, the quiet spectators pretending not to listen. He lowered his tone. "You're enjoying this?" "I'm observing cause and effect," I said. "It's the teacher in me." For a moment he seemed ready to explode, but years of corporate self-control glued his expression back together. "You think silence makes you superior," he said finally. "No," I said. "It just makes me harder to interrupt." Before he could respond, Evan called from across the room. "Greg, we need your sign-off on the final numbers." Greg turned, composed again, walking briskly toward the monitors. The crowd closed behind him like a curtain. I stood near the glass wall, watching reflections move. My own face looked calm, almost bored, while Greg's in the distance glimmered with tension. The night outside pressed against the windows, full of city lights and quiet consequence. Sam texted, "Metrics stable. Everyone's buzzing about the transition. You okay?" "Perfect," I replied. "Almost done." An hour later, the migration completed. Applause scattered across the floor, thin but sincere. Evan shook hands, staff dispersed, phones rang. I gathered my coat. Greg was alone near his desk, typing something too fast, maybe drafting explanations for people who had stopped listening. When he noticed me leaving, his voice cracked through the noise. "Laura," I paused. "Was it worth it?" he asked. I looked back. Every decimal. Then I walked to the elevator, badge swinging softly at my side. The doors closed with a hiss, sealing the noise behind me. As I descended, my phone vibrated again. An automated email. "Merger integration completed successfully. Thank you for your contribution." The phrase made me laugh. Contribution. The word could mean anything. Donation, effort, or, in this case, justice delivered by PowerPoint. Outside, the rain had started again, thin and deliberate. I crossed the street toward the parking garage, heels clicking in rhythm with the drizzle. Somewhere above, the tower still glowed, a monument to ambition and amnesia. At my car, I stopped to breathe. Not relief, just the cool realization that the story had finally balanced itself. No grand triumph, no applause, just equilibrium. Before I left, I looked at my phone one last time. 10 missed calls, all from Greg's office number. I didn't bother listening. Silence, once again, said everything worth saying. The city hadn't slept that night. From my car, I could see the tower glowing like a lantern of exhaustion. The cutover had worked, everything functioned. Systems ran, clients logged in, numbers behaved. Yet something invisible had shifted, something no metric could measure. Greg's name had slid quietly off the company homepage by morning. Leadership restructuring, the statement said. That was corporate language for, you're finished, but we'll call it graceful. I drove to the office at dawn. Sam was already there, looking half triumphant and half wary, the way someone looks when a story ends too neatly. "Did you see the release?" he asked. "I did," I said, setting down my coffee. Predictable punctuation. He leaned back, studying me. "You got what you wanted." "I got what was due," I corrected. Wanting implies emotion. This was arithmetic. He smirked. Arithmetic with confetti. "That's called flair," I said. The office filled slowly with light, the quiet kind that doesn't celebrate. Outside, a truck delivered boxes of promotional material for our next client. Inside, everything felt finished, yet not empty. Just balanced. I could live with balance. By noon, the news cycle had chewed through the story. Local media covered the merger's fresh direction, quoting Evan and 2 executives I'd never met. Greg's name didn't appear once. In a smaller article, a footnote mentioned a consultant praised for clarity and integrity in transition training. That, I knew, was me. Recognition wasn't the point, but it was still a pleasant line to underline with my eyes. Around 3, my office phone rang. I didn't need to look at the caller ID to know. Greg never learned when silence meant enough. I picked up anyway. "Brightline Advisory," he hesitated. "Laura." "You must be running out of numbers to dial," I said. "I thought you'd at least answer once," he said. His voice carried that hollow civility people use when they've forgotten how to sound certain. "I'm answering now. You've got a minute. Use it wisely." He exhaled. "They're saying I mishandled the transition, that I overstepped. You know how this game works. You start losing narrative control and suddenly everything you've built is transparent," I offered. He sighed. "You think you've won." "I never entered a contest. You're the one who brought the scoreboard." He went quiet, then said softly, "Do you ever feel sorry?" "For what?" "For turning everything into proof." I looked out the window. The sun caught on a row of parked cars, bright as polished lies. "Greg, I spent 20 years being proof you were stable. I'm just reallocating evidence." There was nothing left for him to say. The silence stretched, patient, absolute. Then he hung up. I left the office early and drove home through streets that had begun to bloom with spring. Lawns gleamed, driveways gleamed, even the gossip felt newly watered. Suburbia loved a resurrection story, but mine wasn't that kind. I parked, grabbed the mail, and stood on my porch, breathing in the smell of damp grass and expensive detergent from the neighbor's dryer vent. Across the street, Diane waved awkwardly. "Lovely day, isn't it?" she called. "Perfect for gardening," I said. "Some weeds needed pulling." She blinked, uncertain whether it was a metaphor. It was, and it wasn't. Inside, my answering machine blinked with messages, most from potential clients, one from a journalist asking for comment. I deleted them all. Some stories explained themselves without narration. Evening came softly, slipping through curtains and slanted light. I poured wine, sat on the porch, and listened. Somewhere a lawnmower droned, a dog barked, kids argued about whose turn it was to ride the scooter. Ordinary life, the real miracle. And underneath it, the murmur of what people were probably saying about me. The woman who didn't shout, the woman who smiled while the world rearranged itself. A car engine interrupted the stillness. Headlights curved into my driveway. For a second, instinct tightened my chest, But it wasn't Greg's car. It was Evan's. He stepped out, tie loosened, holding a folder. "Didn't expect you," I said. "Neither did I," he said. "I was nearby. Wanted to deliver this in person." He handed me the folder. Inside was a printed letter, formal, congratulatory. The board's acknowledgement of Brightline's exceptional professionalism. "That's flattering," I said. "It's accurate," he said. "Off the record, they were impressed by how you handled things, how calm you were." "Calm is cheaper than therapy," I said. He smiled faintly, then looked toward the street. "Greg's taking a leave, apparently, moving out of town for a while." "Good," I said. "The landscape could use less noise." Evan hesitated. "You don't seem happy. Just resolved." "Happiness is a moving target," I said. "Resolution stays put." He nodded, understanding something he didn't say, then wished me luck and left. The taillights faded into the curve of the street. I went back inside, the house humming with quiet again. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop, not to work but to read old drafts of my teacher lesson plans, the ones Greg had borrowed all those years ago. The line still held, "Character is revealed under pressure." I whispered it once, the way some people say prayers. Outside, thunder rolled far away, one of those spring rumbles that reminds the sky it has power. The air smelled metallic, like anticipation dressed as weather. Then my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "You made your point." I didn't reply. I deleted it. The satisfaction wasn't in the message. It was in knowing who had sent it, and that he finally understood. The rain came fast after that, heavy against the porch roof, turning the street into mirrors. Lights blurred, lawns shimmered, everything washed clean. I stepped outside barefoot, letting the water touch my skin. Across the cul-de-sac, Greg's house stood dark, for sale sign angled under the rain. Perfect symmetry. A car rolled past, tires hissing on wet asphalt. Somewhere in the distance, thunder growled again, but it sounded less like warning, more like applause. I stood there a moment longer, the storm surrounding me, the night sharp and honest. My plan was complete. I turned back toward my door, the porch light catching on the brass plaque beside it. Brightline Advisory. My name below, small but steady. Behind me, my phone buzzed again. Another call from an unknown number. I let it ring until it stopped. Silence filled the air, deep and final, and for once I didn't move to break it.